One of the concerns in the labor market right now is a perceived mismatch in skills, what companies are looking for and what might be actually available in the labor market. Part of the reason why is a very quick reorganization going on at the moment. And to no surprise, AI is playing a role in all of this. But how do we best judge the skills gap? Recently, Wharton and Accenture came together to try and tackle that issue. Pleasure to be joined by Eric Bradlow, who's Vice Dean of AI and Analytics at Wharton, as well as Professor and Chair of the Wharton School Marketing Department. Eric, great to see you again. How are you?
It's great to be on the show, Dan.
Thank you. All right, I've heard the conversation about skills gap for at least a couple of years now. How significant of an issue is it?
Well, the best way I can describe that it's really significant is, as you can imagine, given my role in AI and analytics at the school, I talk to alumni, go travel the world, talk to our current students. The minute I'm done talking, the number one question asked of me is, let's say it's for undergraduates, what should my high schooler be studying? What jobs are going to be left over? It's the
Yeah.
same question asked for by undergrads, MBAs at all levels. I think it's the most significant question from our side, from the academic side, because what should we be training students to do? And the only way to understand that, and remember, we're Wharton, which means we're in the empirical school.
Right.
And we're going to talk about this. We're not just going to opine on the skills gap. We're going to
Right.
actually measure the skills gap.
And so that's part of the reason why this partnership between Wharton and Accenture came about, to kind of better understand what's happening and how to address it.
I think, it's a good question. The Wharton partnership with Accenture, and I should say it is the flagship partnership. We call it the affiliates program. Accenture is the number one affiliate of Wharton AI and Analytics, which doing a little branding here today for that. This is one piece of a much larger partnership, which also involves developing content around AI and analytics, events around AI and analytics, thought pieces around AI and analytics. But absolutely, Accenture is, of course, one of their big parts of their business model is providing support to companies in areas where there are those gaps. And so it's not just to enlighten us, but it's for their structure and their reorganization that they want to understand what the skills gap is as well.
And the term skills-based economy seems to be growing in importance right now from the business side.
I think you've said the correct word, in my view, at least 4 times since this interview started, which is it's not a jobs gap. And that's the crucial part.
Yeah.
People ask, go back 30 years, what job should I go into? That's not the right question anymore. It's what skills do I need to have? And as a
Right.
matter of fact, what you're seeing on more and more resumes, because I see resumes all the time, not just from students, but as you know, I have a company. All the time I see people applying. I do the following, Dan. Obviously, people tend to list their experience. That's great.
Yeah.
They list their education. That's great. I go directly to the bottom of people's resumes, which is typically where they list their skills.
Right.
That's what everyone's hiring against today. Everyone's hiring for people with skills. And while this is not part of the report, as you know, for 20 years, one of the things we've been doing at Wharton AI and Analytics is, while people are students here and to our alumni worldwide, providing people skills-based opportunity to take what they've learned in the classroom and apply those skills to actual real-world projects, because that's what companies are looking for today.
I saw something in the report that also talked about the fact that skills in many instances are becoming more important than the actual job titles that companies are looking to fill.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. In other words, let's see, another thing that's going to happen, besides my agreement with that statement, what you're going to see is assessments that firms do. Look, I'll give you an example with my middle son. He was taking a skills-based job recently at a private equity firm. He
Right.
literally went through, and this is no exaggeration, Dan, 13 rounds of skills-based interviews to
Wow.
come up with, does he know this? Does he know that? Does he
Right.
know this? And so I think what you're also going to see, it's going to back up just from, do I hire Dan Loney? Do I hire Eric Bradlow? You're going to see the evaluation of what skills you have increase. And actually, the nice thing, another thing about artificial intelligence, by the way, is you can ask it to construct those skills based assessments. And not only will it say Eric Bradlow has this skill or not, but if I don't have that skill, it will provide me the education I need to develop that skill.
What does that mean then in terms of the needs, the necessities that the individual will need, or the student coming out of college, or the student coming out of high school going into the workforce, that they will need to have, or at least start to develop while they are still going through their education process?
Yeah. So you talk about two things. What three? Actually, there's three answers to your question. The first is that Eric Bradlow and Dan Loney could be sitting in the same classes, taking the same curriculum, but because of artificial intelligence and the degree and the ability of personalization, Dan will get, even if we have the same grades, Dan will get your skills are deficient in this area, Eric, your skills are deficient in this area.
Right.
The second thing is Dan will get, here's your individualized lesson plan to build your skills in this area. Eric Bradlow, here's your lesson plan to get skills in this area. The
Right.
third thing is, and this, Dan, is going to take a little bit longer because we in education tend to not be the most innovative and fast moving. How does the curriculum change from course labels
Yeah.
to skill based labels? And
Yeah.
that's what, by the way, that's what students know, because students, by the way, students typically lead us faculty. Students know the skills they need, and they're going to be looking for courses, whether we try to tell it in the title of the course or in the description. Trust me, students, here's what I know students are doing, Dan. You'll like this. They're ingesting syllabi from faculty about courses and
Right.
seeing whether it matches the skills they want to acquire.
Are then the changes that we will see occur in the education side, are they more subtle in terms of the development off of what is already being taught? Or are we talking about a complete 180?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there'll be differing of opinions on this, but since I'm here, I get to give my opinion on this.
Right, right.
Uh, I think everything has to change. I'll just
Okay,
give you an example of myself. And I know I speak not just for myself. One of my colleagues who works with us at Wharton AI and Analytics started what's called the Wharton Generative AI Lab, which is Ethan Malik, who's
right,
extremely well known now, is well read and well posted on these topics. He and I both believe that pretty much everything has to change. Let me give you an example. So I'm about to start literally 2 weeks from today or 2 weeks from yesterday. I teach our MBA core here at the Wharton School. It's a course, not surprisingly, Dan, in data-driven marketing, which
sure,
brings together my love of data science and marketing. Up until 2 years ago, this was a course where I would have students ingest data, analyze data using R or Python, come out with analyses, interpret those analyses, and say what it means to the firm. Well,
right,
now, of course, the generation of data can be done using generative AI, whether it's from real data or simulated data. The analysis is now about prompt engineering. It's not about teaching them R or Python, because you can code that directly in large language models. So literally every aspect of my course, from evaluation. I have Dan Loney read a case. Let's be honest. Dan Loney's taking that case, ingesting it into a large language model, is going to ask it for the answer. As a matter of fact, if Dan Loney is a smart man, Dan Loney is doing that. And
yeah,
by the way, that's the skills that jobs want you to have. They're not going to drop 50 PDFs on your thing and say, print them out and read them. They know you're not going to do that.
right.
So I'm a believer that we need to totally rethink the way we educate people around skills. And I know we're going to talk in a second about which skills I think tend to be over versus undervalued.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because from a business perspective, they have to look at this from the bottom line, which means the financial side of this. So there is a value when you're talking about what skills are most valuable and what skills are not. And can you already see certain skills that are kind of universally more valuable kind of across the business, no matter who it is?
So there's two answers to your question. First, we have to talk about the skills that are valued, and
Yeah,
then we have to talk about supply and demand. There
right,
could be a skill that's extremely valued, but there's too much of it in the market.
right,
So let me give you an example. This is why we worked with Accenture on this skills gap. So let me just be clear on what we did to all of our listeners here. There's a company called Lightstart. What we did is that we scraped data from both job postings and from resumes.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Job
Yep.
postings list, forget just the titles, the skills they and experience they want people to have.
Right.
Resumes are people highlighting the skills and experience they have.
Right.
Let's see if there's a gap between the two. That was the intent of the project, to have an empirically driven measure that we could do every year. Wharton partnered with Accenture on the skills gap. Now, the
Right.
next natural question, remember also, jobs come with salaries, which means, or ranges, which means you can now say which skills tend to be paid more, right? You can do that.
Yeah.
You can also say which resumes and which skills in those resumes tend to get accepted for higher paying jobs. You can start doing that. So all the things that you might want to answer, you can do through this data. So
Right.
let me tell you the two big highlights that came out for me. So one of the things I hear all the time, Dan, I'm sure you've heard this, is that um, 5 years ago, every child, man, woman, etc., was told you got to study computer science because
Right.
big data science is the future.
Yep.
And now all I hear is, should my kids take any coding classes whatsoever?
Right.
Because isn't computer science going to be entirely democratized? So one of the skills we found is that there's a oversupply of people with claimed computer science skills. Now, I'm not saying people don't need those skills,
Right.
but there's an oversupply of it. The part on the other side, though, the two things that never go away, and I'm not sure AI is going to replace those skills, maybe they will, are what I would call communication and selling. Because what happens is if AI can do the technical parts of jobs or parts of the technical parts, you still need to be able to sell the ideas. You still need to
Sure.
be able to sell your company's services. So that part, there's an let me say, be clear. There's a claimed undersupply, which means maybe people aren't highlighting the right skills in their resumes.
Right.
The second thing that came about was, I hate to say this, but too many people claim I've got leadership skills. Well,
Right.
the problem, I'm not saying leadership skills aren't important. All I'm saying is when we look at the supply and the demand of leadership skills, there are too many people that say they have leadership skills compared to jobs that are hiring people that say we need someone with leadership skills.
What do you think then this means for the labor market as we go into the future?
Well, that's good. Good, great question. These are great questions. That's why I love talking to you, Dan.
Thank you,
um,
Eric.
no, no, no. This is why we've been partnering for 15 plus years on
Oh
this.
my God. Yeah.
It's been, and then sometimes it's around sports, sometimes it's around this week in business. It's all
Yep.
kinds of things.
Yep.
I would say two things. Here's what's going to happen in the short term. I think, obviously, in my view, the Wharton School, Accenture, we're going to push this report out. Big launch tomorrow, big, big PR launch about this. First, if I were a rational person looking for a job, in the short term, maybe I can't do skill acquisition, but I'll put on my marketing hat. I can reposition the skills I have around the skills that companies are demanding. So rather than emphasizing my leadership skills, which I'm not saying you don't need to have, but
Right.
maybe you should emphasize the things that we're finding: communication, your technical skills, because
Right.
those are the skills that there seem to be an undersupply for. So I think this is literally marketing. What you're going to see is a short-term repositioning of people in the way they describe their skills. Now, in the medium term, this is where, whether it's academic institution with full-time jobs or what it is, it's other institutions that are actually coming up with short-term courses. That's what we're going to see. We're actually going to see people saying, I see. There's a shortage of digital marketing skills. There's a shortage of web development skills.
Right.
They're going to come in and create that content.
Eric, always great to get your thoughts and your insight. Thanks again. Look forward to talking again down the road.
It's great to talk to you, Dan, and I really believe this Wharton-Accenture Skills Gap report will be something we hope that is tracked as much as anything over time.
Eric Bradlow, Vice Dean of AI and Analytics here at the Wharton School.